Meeting of September 19th, 2017. Introductions and remarks.
Thank you very
Hello.
much. Sorry about that. Okay, so welcome everyone. Tonight's agenda is a very full one, so we will try to move right along. We're going to begin by talking about our K12 enrollment update, so we'll hear from all three levels today. We will do an introduction to the middle school program review, which is one of our district goals for this year. Dr. Rabarczyk is going to be talking about the school start time action plan related to adolescent sleep. We'll also do an update on the technology integration study, and I'm going to speak briefly about the PDE's comprehensive plan, as there have been some changes to that as well. Coming up next month, we'll be looking at the English Language Arts audit report, which is something we typically do in October, as our reports from the previous year, and we'll also be revisiting comprehensive plan again. I wanted to make a quick announcement that we do have some parent focus groups coming up, so our technology parent focus groups are going to be on October 19th. There'll be one in the morning at 9:30, and then there will be another one at 6 o'clock that evening as well for folks for whom that works better. And then we will also be running the English Language Arts focus groups on October 3rd, one at 6 p.m., and then on October 5th, for those who prefer the daytime, there will also be one at 10 a.m., and Dr. Kearney will be running those. Would you like to, we'll go through the questions from our last meeting before we get started as well?
Surely.
Okay, great. So we had a few questions, and you should have an additional packet I gave you today with a cover on it, additional attachments. Perfect. So one of the questions that came up last time was a question about summer school attendance from previous years. So you'll see that there's a handout attached there that gives you a chart that shows you what the different programs have looked like over the course of the different years. We had another question about the RTSD art collection, also referred to as the Rosemont collection. If you came in through the main door today, you saw some of the pieces that were actually part of that collection. And there was a question about what the use of the art collection is and what we're doing with it. We actually have a teacher who's a curator who is in charge of the art collection, who takes care of it, makes sure that it's kept in good repair, and also stages it throughout the district based on requests or rotating art shows. We've also put some things out on loan. In fact, when I Googled the Rosemont Art Collection, one of the pieces that's sitting upstairs in the curriculum office was on the homepage of the Wayne Art Center. They borrowed it from us for some particular art show, and they were interested in some of those pieces. Another question we had was about the cancellation of our August committee meeting, and that was really just a scheduling issue, trying to get the whole committee together in August, so, or I'm sorry, in July. So we missed our July meeting, came together in August. We talked about accessing attachments on the website, how it takes a little bit longer to navigate to some of the attachments for the Board Curriculum Committee meeting. And I know we're moving to Board Docs, and we just had our training yesterday. But in the meantime, Mr. Petiti did go in and make some changes there, so hopefully you'll be able to access, I believe the attachments should be about 2 clicks away from the user. What do we do with seniors after they finish taking the AP exams or after they're accepted into college? I spoke with Mr. Bechtold, and PT is here as well tonight. Students do take their AP exams earlier in the year, slightly before the time that the marking period ends, but we do have a curriculum that is year-long for each of those classes, and students are expected to continue to participate in that curriculum for the rest of the year. We have guidelines in place that actually require them to still take a final exam or to earn a B+ during that final marking period. So not only do we have rich and important content to cover, there's also some accountability for our students during those ending weeks of school, when we all get excited about graduation and summer coming and things like that. There was a question about internships. And I don't know if you remember, we had Chris Massaro here last spring, and he talked a little bit about some of the internship programs we have going on at the high school. There's also a feature on our homepage right now about the Adventurous program that students can participate in. And this year we also have some students participating in some of the academies at the Delaware County Intermediate Unit. So we have, while we don't have a widespread internship program for students at the end of their senior year, we do have several different opportunities that students participate in based in their interests, and also core curriculum to cover as well for those students who are still here. There was a question about the opioid, how we're addressing opioid use and the opioid crisis. There is a handout in your packet that gives you a list of some of the different things. We actually assembled it for another purpose a short time ago. But it's a short, it's not that short, it's an informal list of some of the things that happen here in Radnor regarding things like our full-time drug and alcohol counselor from the Karen Foundation, some of the different trainings that the professionals in our district have had, and those types of things. So that's there for your review. And then there was a question about concussions. Are we looking into reducing sports that contribute to concussions? And again, you know, the health and safety of our students is a top priority, whether it be in a sport or in a contact sport or any other different kind of activity they might participate in. We are in tune with what the latest best practices are regarding preventing concussions, treating concussions, and we have quite a few interventions and supports in place to make sure that we do everything we can to protect our students from any of those things, and to keep up with what's going on in the field regarding those pieces. And I think we have, is Kevin here too? Yep. And we had one question that Mr. Kane is going to answer for us, so we'll invite him up to answer the last question.
Good evening. So at the August 29th business meeting, the following question was asked. Does anyone study whether this, referring to educational placements of students with disabilities, is the best for the district monetarily or educationally? The district regularly reviews our programs to determine how to provide services for our students with disabilities. Those services can include special classes, separate schooling, removal of students from their local schools, but only when those needs are appropriate. The educational plan of the student is outlined in an individualized education program. That IEP team meets annually. Members of the IEP team include parents and educators, and they are the team that decides the appropriate placement of students. So we do look for cost containment when we can, working with our local intermediate unit, working with, as Maureen mentioned, we utilize Karen Foundation and various local services, to keep as many students in the district as possible. So it is reviewed.
Thank you. That was pretty comprehensive. Thank you very much. Public comment is next. Hi, Judy. Welcome.
Thank you. Judy Sherry, Governor's Circle. Just to clarify some of the comments about things that I've brought up previously, I didn't suggest that we eliminate sports that involve concussions, because that might be all sports. I mean, I think quite a few of them involve concussions. But I have asked at another meeting if we keep track of concussions, and also, excuse me, one thing. And what I was interested in knowing is, are we changing any of the practices that we follow regarding these sports to ensure that we are taking care of the health and safety of our students, which was just mentioned. It's really an important thing. And it seems to me that almost every single meeting I attend, before I get here, I read something else about the effect of concussions. This happens to be something in the Wall Street Journal this month that says, in Vermont, football participation is under pressure as parents increasingly worry about the risks of brain trauma and other injuries. Yet almost nowhere is the game at risk of going extinct but in Vermont. So apparently the number of boys playing high school football in the state has fallen 48%. In response, the state has taken bold steps to address the safety concerns. And starting this fall, Vermont will be the first state to end tackling at the middle school level, opting instead for what officials call full contact flag football. If football is going to survive, we have to do whatever we can to promote it as a safe activity. I'm not going to go on and continue to read. I know you're under the gun tonight to finish a lot of things, but I really hope that the board and the administration takes a very serious look at the consequences of this sport in particular, and the practices and the age level involved in different activities connected with it. I have to go through things that I was going to bring up, but they're already covered, so that's a help. Related to the art collection, do we have this art collection inventoried and cataloged, and could that be put online? Because I was thinking that teachers could actually take a look at whatever we have and use those materials for something that they're teaching in class. So I think, it could be a very good resource for teachers. Curious about how teachers evaluated the professional development speaker at the beginning of the year. And related to, a Mandarin, I didn't bring that up last time, but I still am interested in knowing what steps we're taking so that course can actually run next year. Enrollment update, and just a couple of things that jumped out. Ethan's enrollment of 428 is significantly lower than Radnor's at 588 and Wayne's at 575. It's 37% fewer students at Ethan than Radnor Elementary School. So I'm wondering if the administration recommends at all looking at redistricting. Ethan, we know, has the largest land mass, over 55 acres. And also related to class sizes. In the middle school and high school, when you have class sizes, you might have a class size over 40, but if you have 2 teachers in the class, that might not be an issue. So I think, too, you have to look at maybe another column of ratio of students to teachers. As I said, because some of these combined classes can be larger, but doesn't necessarily mean that students aren't getting the attention they deserve. And finally, last thing, two other things. The middle school clubs, half of them do not have sponsors. What's the timeline on getting a sponsor for the club? And I'm really interested in getting some kind of update at some point from the curriculum committee on the value and use of pods and how, they were touted as being the best thing since sliced bread when we built the middle school. I'd like to hear an update on, do we still use pods as they were intended to at Radnor and at the middle school, and how do we feel about them today? Thank you.
Thanks, Judy. All right. Okay.
We have one other public comment.
Okay. Hi, welcome.
Hi, my name is Dina Honesty, and I have a 4th grader at Wayne Elementary, and I have a son who graduated in 2016. He's now a sophomore at University of Maryland. I think I have a unique perspective on the sleep study action plan that's going on as far as later start times. I experienced a high school student starting at 7:30 at the same time that I had a kindergartner and 1st grader and 2nd grader starting at 9 o'clock. And everything I saw supports every single thing you read. My daughter goes to bed way earlier than my son did. So she was certainly prepared to wake up earlier. I also, in a lot of the research I did, found that there are studies that say that teenagers need the same amount of sleep as a toddler. Teenagers by nature aren't going to bed at 9 o'clock. It's just not going to happen. The lack of sleep that they have impacts all aspects of their education. They're less organized. They're less ready to learn in those classes that start at 7:45 or 8 o'clock in the morning. I just think, based on the prolific amount of studies that I've seen, and I'm sure many of you have been looking at those same studies, that it's really important that we seriously consider making this change. I would love to see it happen before my 4th grader goes to high school. That would be ideal for me personally. But I know there are many people in this district who are ready for this to happen now, as soon as possible. I don't know exactly what the costs involved would be. I'm sure there is some additional cost as far as with transportation, but I'm not sure what that is. I think it's, obviously something that needs to be looked at, and I think that the Action Committee is looking at those things. I just wanted to stress from the viewpoint of a parent who's been there with both of those different students, it makes complete sense to me to have younger children start school earlier and older children start school later, simply for the fact of their natures and the type of sleep that they get and the type of sleep that they need. So I know that you guys are discussing this and studying it. I really, really hope that when parents and students are surveyed, I think that what I'm saying will be supported by other parents. And what teenage student doesn't want to start school later? So I'm sure they'll support it as well.
Thanks so much, Dina.
Thank you.
All right. Roberta, do you want to come up quickly?
Ms. Michelson, then we have one online.
Got it. Just want to, we've got a big agenda I want to get
I know.
going, so.
Roberta Winters, I want to thank Maureen for answering those questions. It makes our day better. I would also like to mention that I think the class size information looks interesting, and it's fine unless you've got the kid who's in the big class. And I hope things are being done to accommodate those children and those teachers, because we know it makes a significant difference, and that those kids who are in large classes at the high school aren't the same ones who are in large classes at the middle school who had all those kids trying to teach English and math when they really need more attention. So it's not just the class size, but the long-term impacts of the same kids in the same big classes over time. So please look at that. And finally, I would hope, given the interest in the sleep issue, as just previously mentioned, that there may be ways in which we might expedite the timeline. Thank you.
Thanks, Roberta. Go ahead.
This message is from Stacy Mandel. I have been a public school teacher and a teacher's coach for 17 years combined, on both sides of the country, in public and private, urban and suburban. I am now a mindfulness instructor for youth. I suffered from insomnia for many years. Thankfully, none anymore. I have learned a lot about sleep habits and the impact of sleep habits on learning between working with families, teachers, and my own personal experience. Adequate sleep is critical to all components of wellness. There are many reasons why a person may not be getting adequate sleep, but all are under one's ability to control. As you may know, according to the National Sleep Foundation, biological sleep patterns shift towards later times for both sleeping and waking during adolescence, meaning it is natural to not be able to fall asleep before 11 p.m. Teens need about 8 to 10 hours of sleep each night to function best. School start times are not a factor which a student and his or her parents can control. Even if a family controls all other factors, attending RTSD middle school or high school on time equate to sleep deprivation. It has been scientifically proven that sleep deprivation has a cumulative effect on health. The poor sleep habits have a cumulative effect on future sleep habits. Adult sleep habits are created and practically cemented during youth. One can correct unhealthy sleep patterns later, but it's quite challenging. Moreover, when one is sleep deprived, it becomes easier to continue to add to the sleep deficit in other ways, rather than counteract it. I experienced this myself. As a former teacher and current mindfulness instructor, I know that it is nearly impossible to be in optimal learning zone without emotional regulation. The ability to self-regulate depends upon different factors, including a lack of stress due to inadequate sleep. Best practices in teaching are now informed by brain-based learning research. Inadequate sleep creates stress and is ultimately perceived as trauma by the brain. Trauma blocks one ideal's cognitive functions, and this directly affects learning. I strongly urge you to consider all options to change our middle and high school start times to no earlier than 8:30 a.m. This would help ensure that our students, including bus drivers, would reach the minimum 8 hours of sleep each night. Thank you for your consideration.
Thanks. Okay. Approval of our minutes?
I think they're fine.
Fine? Fine. Okay. Agenda item number 1.
Great. Let's move into
Let's go.
enrollment. Dr. Barczyk will start with elementary.
So as we start the school year, this is from the 14th of September as of that date. As you can see, and it was mentioned, Ethan has 428 students, Rest currently has 588 students, and Wayne has 575 students. And the next column, you will see the number of classrooms, the number of sections based on that actual enrollment. So we are 22 at Ithan, 29 at Rest, and at West. And then the last row shows you the number of seats based on enrollment in regards to the average class size. So we'll continue to monitor these as we move forward. At this time, we have a total of 3 packets out throughout the elementary, the 3 schools. So we don't know if they're coming through at this point. So I wanted to give you actual numbers as compared to projected at this point.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
All right, and we'll invite Ryan up to do an update for the middle school.
Hello, good
Ryan.
evening. Thank you everyone for having me in the middle school representing for the update on enrollment. So if you could bring your attention to one of the handouts that was on the table when you walked in, much like the elementary school, we took a look in the summer in August as we were still getting new enrollments, and we provided different numbers, and we try to differentiate into 2 different categories, with and without performance music, because after all, those are classes we really want to have big, a choral program or music, orchestra band. So again, we try to show with and without because we thought they might skew the numbers. And then most recent, about a month later, mid-September, we took a look again to see what our school looks like, week and a half, 2 weeks into school. One of the things that, you might question why the numbers fluctuate is that, we are a transient district, and in some ways that families are moving to Radnor Township School District from around the local region, and we get international students, which is great. I mean, we have a great reputation, so they're coming here. They want to live. They want to go to school here. We had roughly about 40 students, new students, join our middle school this year. Almost 27, I believe, are 6th graders alone. So, they come in mid-August. We do some initial diagnostics, assessing to see where they're at. We try to look at the whole picture, and we had to place them appropriately. And so some of the numbers do increase with the influx of new students. We met last week, and since then we had 4 more students join the middle school. So it's one of those, it's still a fluid number. We're still under 15 days of school at this point, so we're still getting a few new sign-ups and a few exiting the district for other reasons. They may have moved to private school, who knows what. But again, as the year moves on, we look to solidify this and give you another update at some point, maybe second semester. So again, just to point out a few of the highlights, I guess. We met last year. We talked about numbers. One of the concerns was the guidelines, classes that are over 25. And the last couple of years, we were sitting close to 52 to 53 classes per year that were higher than 25. One of the things you'll notice on here, if you exclude the performance music program, we have about an 85% reduction in classes that exceed the guidelines. So, there was a lot of different people that were involved in this. I want to say thank you to the school board and the central office. We had the support of curriculum, Mr. Stitzel and AHR and Dr. McCook. They allowed us to work with one of the programmers through eSchool to make sure our new schedule, our new classes, how can we maximize our staff. And we really were able to work with the high school. Mr. Bechtel came down a couple of times throughout the summer, called down. We did some sharing of staff. We worked with our guidance counselors, Mr. Deal, Mrs. Ottaviano, and Mrs. Raines, to try to work and get these numbers within the guidelines. So again, it was really a team effort. Mrs. Purnell and Dr. Kent at the building level, just a lot of people, probably missing a few, that worked to get these numbers down. So again, 0 would be the perfect number, but we do have fluctuating students, new enrollments, moving up or down in class levels. So again, we're sitting at 8 students, which we're very, very happy with at this point.
8 classes.
I'm sorry, 8. Yes, 8 classes that exceed the 26 or more.
Can you tell us where they are, Ryan?
Yes.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, okay. So,
Can you tell us where they are, Ryan?
yeah, in some ways, it kind of reflects our enrollment. For instance, 7th grade, we have an unusually smaller class, and there's 0 classes. 8th grade is a very large class. It's sitting at 319. And with 8th grade, they have a lot of choice and encore, which kind of creates some more scheduling, constraints. So 7 of the 8 classes are in 8th grade. And of those, only one is we'll call it an English, math, or science attested area.
Wait, say that again?
So to clarify that, so there's 8 classes that are 26 or higher, and only one of the classes of the 8 is a tested subject area, so math, science, or history, and that's a 6th grade math class. But all the other ones would be one phys ed, one health, and social studies round out the 8. So again, we work really hard just to make sure that some of the most essential classes were under those limits, and sometimes just due to the nature of an encore world language, which 2 of the classes are world languages we talked about earlier with Latin. So again, we really just focus on getting the numbers down anywhere and everywhere possible.
Good, thank you.
Okay.
Anyone else?
Yeah, so I was delighted when I saw that there were going to be 2, when we heard that in August. And I'm not so happy to see that there are more. I mean, I'm delighted that it's not what I considered a major problem last year with all of them running. And I'm not lecturing you. Don't you looking like I'm scolding you. But so we had watch position in the budget this year that I believe we didn't hire. So could that have been a way to alleviate, to actually just crack this problem? I don't want to see any of these classes. Guidelines are there to be followed, not to violate every year. So you said they're not, I'm pleased to hear they're not core subject areas, I guess we would say. But so we do have one 6th grade math class that's over our guidelines.
It's at 27, correct?
At 27. Well, so did we explore hiring another math person to alleviate it? Is that?
Well, luckily, I mean, HR was collaborating with us throughout the summer. They met with us many times at the building level, and we did utilize some of the watch positions or point positions to bring down some of the world language and the math numbers. Okay. And, in the summer, none of the math classes were over. 5 of the 8 classes are at 26 students. So is it over the guideline? Yes, but, luckily it's not. A couple of years ago, we had 32 kids in the math class. So, it is 26 and 27 are some of the classes that are over. We work really hard, and, we try to utilize, the watch positions when possible. So, again, Mr. Sitza was, open to anything we needed. I don't know what the watch position looks like now. Again, I know there's 4 for the whole district, so I'm not really aware of the middle or the elementary and high school needs as it.
All right, so let's backtrack again. Of the 8 classes, it's Latin. Is that what you said? And other world languages. So they're
just 2 world language, Latin, correct?
Okay, so the 2 Latin classes and other foreign language classes.
No, that's it. So, between sharing of staff with the high school and utilizing some of those other positions, we were able to bring all the world languages down under the guidelines, except for 2 Latin classes.
For 2 Latin. So what are the other 5 classes then?
There's 1 math, 6th grade.
The 6th grade math.
There's
so
1
that's
8th grade health. There's 1 8th grade phys ed.
Okay.
There's 3 social studies position, or 3 social studies classes in 8th grade as well.
Okay.
And those are all at 26, the social studies.
And they're all at 26.
The social studies, correct. And the health and phys ed at 8th grade are all at 26.
Okay.
So, if I could jump in, the social studies class is running at 26, and looking at a total classes of 578, and having 8 where they are with the classes that are at, those 8 classes being at 26, and then you said 1 was at 27. Looking at the health and the phys ed, I think this was an incredible job the middle school has done with the schedule this year. Really worked very hard to balance those class sizes. These questions about, out of the 578, these 8, I think are really good questions, and we looked very closely over the summer at each one of these classes. And sometimes these are discussions we're going to continue to have about when do we, when do we pull that trigger to add another teacher? When do we feel comfortable running it at 26? There's a lot of components that go into that discussion and those pieces. And it is a bit of a balancing as we look at the full areas of where the other areas where we did add staffing as well. So there were places where staffing was added. So I really want to commend. it's unfortunate, the middle school, you weren't here at last month's curriculum meeting. There was so much, praise and thanks that was given to you, and I know the board and administration feels that as well. I know that the middle school administrative team worked very hard to schedule what they did this year, and we thank you for all your efforts there. And we're going to continue to every year chip away and work to try to make sure that we have as few numbers as possible that are below that standard.
Well, so I'm taking from this that a lot of kids come at the 11th hour, but isn't that always the case? Is this an unusual year? I kind of think we should maybe have, I don't know if it's possible, dual certified people that could step in if we do get a swing of kids that come in and all of a sudden we've got a problem in math that.
Well, I would just jump in and say, I don't know, Maureen wants to jump in, go ahead. I would say we don't have a problem in math, but I would.
Right, and I think it's really difficult to know, as Ryan mentioned, you don't know if you're going to get an influx of students in 6th grade and 7th grade, and the certification can be an issue. So right now, we'd be looking at a health, PE, math, social studies teacher. So you're not looking at one person, you're looking at quite the combination. And then with the encores, remember we talked about our efforts to make sure that students were able to get their first choice and worst case scenario, their second choice, the cadre of students who already took Latin 1, who are really passionate about taking Latin 2, weighing the pros and cons. Well, do we ask students to switch to a different language the second year, or do we move one more year along with classes of 26 or 27? And Ryan's already corrected that problem because in Latin 1, we don't have that size of a class coming through. So next year, that won't be an issue anymore. But middle school can be challenging because there are so many different certifications. And it is, it very much feels like running 3 separate schools with the 3 grade levels.
And at all our levels, we have to balance that question during the summer. There comes a point we've got to make a decision. There comes a point where we have to program for the year. Yes, we're always aware, but it's always, that week before school, it's always different each year how many students might show up at our doors. And, running a class at 26 versus adding another teacher that might only reduce that to 24, maybe, depending how many sections there are, and the time that it would take to get that new teacher are all part of the factors as well. And that's where we have to look at it. Are we running it at 26 or are we running it at 28, 29, 30? It all plays into that discussion at the time. So it is something we're aware of and continue to monitor, and we have to watch each year what are those circumstances.
All right.
Can
Thank
I
you for
just
the
quickly
discussion.
give you the I'm so happy to have the opportunity to thank you, and you too, Mrs. Purnell. I wasn't here last month, so I'll thank you now. Really, what a sigh of relief across Radnor, or at least across Facebook, when everyone's schedules came out so early. And I will tell you, I had an administrator who, a long time ago, who is no longer here, say, you know what, parents are the ones who care so much about schedules. The kids don't care. It's the parents' problem. It is not. And I liken it to knowing you have to start on your first day, but you don't know who your boss is going to be, and you don't know who your colleagues are going to be, and you don't know a whole bunch of other factors. It's stressful, and the family ends up picking up that burden of stress. So thank you very much. Really wonderful. Appreciate it.
Again, thank you, everyone.
I appreciate it. Absolutely.
Our pleasure.
Nice, great news. Thank you so much for the work that went in and the diligence with which you took this and ran with it to fix it. Thank you.
Well, thank you, everyone.
All right. High school.
High school.
Hi, Dan.
One here. Good afternoon. Thank you. All right. So we have one minor correction on the high school sheet. At the last 2 rows of the first section, it should say classes with 29 or more, because 28 is our guideline at the high school. So both at the top in the box and at the bottom of the box, it should say classes of 29 or more and percentage of classes of 29 or more. So I've got my assistant back here, Mrs. Kevgis, who does a lot of the heavy lifting with the master schedule, and she's done a phenomenal job with this. One of the things that when you're looking at these numbers, you see 37 with 29 or more. What I'll say about that is very typical for a high school. 27 of those 37 courses are actually PE classes. So it's not uncommon for us to have 29 or 30 students running around out in the field in a PE class. So that comprises the lion's share of that. We also have 2 of those that are integrated classes, so those are co-taught. You have 2 teachers in front of the students. So again, if you're co-teaching a class, it's not uncommon to have more than 28 students in there. The rest of the classes are, we have 3 business, 1 world language, and 4 social studies classes. When you look at what we try to do and what our philosophy is at the high school, we think class size is important, but we also think that students getting their first choice, if we can make it work, we're really going to work towards that. And so sometimes when you see this, it's because a student really has a goal of going for a particular field, and the class size is set, and we're working with the teacher and making sure that they feel they can handle it, and working with the student and the parent and making sure that we can get them in after the courses have been set. So that's where we are. The top section obviously is without the performance music. The bottom section is with all courses. So I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Any reservations on your part, Dan, about the way your numbers have shaken out for those classes, particularly the business, world language, and so is world language Latin just as a matter of interest?
It is not.
It is not. Okay.
It is not, no. It's actually a German 2 class, German 2
German
honors.
2. Okay. All right.
So, and we worked with central office on this and spoke to Mr. Stitzel, and we have some juggling. So one of the things that we're fortunate at is we've got multi-certed teachers. So we actually have one teacher that has 3 certifications. So we got an additional 0.2 Spanish and freed up an additional German. And so we were making last-minute additions with HR to try to make things fit.
Thanks for those efforts. I know it's a challenge. Thank you. Anybody else?
Yeah. So the gym classes, just for our information, how large are they? There's 27 that are over 27 classes that are over 29 students.
That are over
large
28, so 29 or more.
Yeah, but how large? Are they 35? Are they
No,
30?
no. So
Are
it's I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, but 29 to 31.
Okay.
Most of them, I did look at the section numbers last week, and the majority of them were 29s. We do
Okay.
have some 30s in there, and I believe we had 1 or 2 sections at 31.
Okay.
But we're not talking 35 to 38 students in those sections.
And so here's me thinking, well, we've got a class or 2 in the middle school of social studies that's over our guidelines, and we've got 4 at the high school in social studies. I wonder if we could have used another social studies teacher and covered all 5 or 6 of those classes. I don't know what type of social studies, if this is like AP, something that somebody maybe wouldn't be qualified to teach, but I don't know. That's what I'm thinking as soon as I see this. Did that question get asked?
I'm not going to turn away a social studies teacher. As a former social studies teacher,
Then I'll ask the question.
Mr. Bechtel wouldn't turn away any. But Mr. Bechtel does an excellent job of trying to balance all of that. Certainly, those are questions that we look at, and we look at where does it make sense, where we can try to share staff. Sharing staff is not easy, though, because then it has to fit in the right place at the right time as well. And so that's not always an easy fit when we're trying to share staff. So just because we had social studies at the middle school and high school, I don't know that it would have matched up. But I can tell you that during the process, both the district office and the high school administration and the middle school administration look very closely at all the different options. But there comes a point where we've got to make decisions and say, okay, what is reasonable? What is a number that we feel that this is appropriate? And that's how we make some of those decisions on those classes. Again, having worked in 3 different high schools, been part of 3 different high schools, for total classes and then for our numbers and where they come out, these are pretty incredible. These are pretty incredible numbers that both at the middle school and high school are able to put together. And I think Mr. Bechtold has worked at other high schools as well. And I have never asked you that, but I would bet these are pretty good numbers.
These
in
are
comparison.
very good numbers.
Yeah.
And again, I'm going to give credit to Mrs. Kevgis because she worked very hard on these. This is an outstanding schedule that she put together.
Yeah.
Thank you. You have anything?
Well, Not for Mr. Bechtold, but
Okay.
overall.
Go ahead.
So is my understanding that the Radnor Elementary School is now maxed out in terms of space, that we couldn't add another classroom even if we wanted to? Is that true?
I'll tell you, I don't know that answer that question off the top of my head. I would say that the issue of what we've seen now with the numbers at Radnor Elementary is something that administration is monitoring closely and discussing. And I think over the next several months, we need to administratively come back to the board and talk to the board about what it is we need to look at and what are steps do we want to take, before next year begins. So that's something that in December, January, February, we'll be coming forward to discuss more with the board to talk about because, our numbers have grown there. And what are the steps and what are the things we want to look at as we move into the future? And we want to be ahead of it. We want to make sure we're being proactive about it.
And do you think redistricting might be an option to look at? I'm sorry, I said the word.
You said the dirty R
is
word,
it-
Julie.
I
I can't believe
yeah,
you
well,
know.
Surprises for you. Is that something it's time to talk about?
I think as we look at things, I think we should always be smart and look at all options, but right now, we want to try to gather and look at and understand what are our numbers, what are our projections. I've had plenty of times in districts where we thought we need to redistrict and we've realized we haven't needed to redistrict. So before we create alarm in the community, I want us administratively to take a look and then come forward to the board with, here are some things we believe we need to look at. And at that time, when we come forward to the board, we would share whether or not that's one of the options we think we need to look at as we
And
move
you said
forward.
January, February?
Yeah, I would say in January, February, we come forward with, just share with the board, here's how we, the items we think we need to look at and address, as we monitor Radnor.
All right, thank you.
Dan?
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Really good, and thank you to PT for all the work you've done to maximize value at Radnor High School for students and everyone else. Thank you. All right.
The next item is District Goal Number 4, which is the middle school program review. I gave you a handout to take a look at. I won't spend a lot of time on it. I just want to keep you updated on where we are in the process. So what you'll see is a brief snapshot of the action plan that we've put together. We're going to be working with the middle school to look at 3 specific areas. One will be academic excellence, and we've identified some specific questions in that area. The other one will be organizational structures and the processes in place at the middle school. And then the third one is going to be organizational culture and the climate. And just briefly to give you again a snapshot of what you can expect to hear about during the course of the year, we're going to be working together this fall to identify a committee. We have some eager volunteers that have already come forward, but we'll be fleshing that out to make sure we have a nice balanced representation to work on the study. We'll be refining those study questions, so you'll see that they may change or there may be a few additional ones before we begin. And then we're going to start by defining what best practice for middle schools is across the country and what we believe it should be here in Radnor, so that we have that barometer or yardstick to use as we take a look at what's going on at the middle school. During the winter, we'll be collecting some evidence of that best practice and identifying where there might be needs and gaps. So if we believe that a middle school should have certain practices or certain procedures or certain materials even in place, and we, through the investigation, find out that maybe that's not there, that's where we'll be putting together some recommendations and coming back to the administration and to Mr. Batchelor with some recommendations for some changes or evolutions over there. All right, any questions? No? Right. All right, thank you very much.
I look forward to it.
I would just ask all board members that over the next few weeks or months, if there are questions or things or other things that you haven't thought about tonight, to please, email directly Dr. McQuiggan. Let her know if there's anything.
That would be great.
Yeah, definitely look forward to this.
Great.
Good.
The middle
All
school is
right.
very excited about it.
Good.
Now Dr. Barczyk is going to talk the same piece of information about the adolescent sleep.
All right, very good.
So as you know, over the past couple of years, the township had been approached by various individuals and groups regarding this topic. So it was brought to light when Dr. Judith Owens came and gave her discussion about adolescent sleep. So the task force has been kind of in limbo for about last year and a half. So we want to bring it out again and bring it up I have Mr. David Stango, who will be joining me as my co-chair on this committee. And what we really just wanted to do today is just provide a sort of, as Dr. McQuiggan did with the middle school, provide an action plan that we plan on following as we go through this year. So as you can see, part of those actions, the action plan will be providing a website page that we could provide some thorough updates throughout the process, whether it be from our task force meetings and blogging opportunities that we can provide information. We're going to do an action research type of approach. We're investigating other districts who have already implemented, but I think our main concern is knowing our community here and understanding what the community is saying about the school start time and sleep, adolescent sleep, and understanding how the direction they want to go with it. We'll have surveys of districts who already implemented, as well as parents, guardians, and students, as well as holding focus groups of other stakeholders and variety of representatives from local colleges, the business, the Wayne Business Association, having different individuals on that focus group so we can get a better idea of what's happening outside just of our school walls. We also want to have a student forum as well as a parent forum, and then making some type of conclusion and recommendation to the superintendent and the rest of the administration of how to move forward. But in the short term, we do want to look at what the current research says. We want to look at what we've done in the district already. There are some things that have been looked at. I know Mr. Bechtold and PT and Mr. Stango have already implemented some things or looks at some things at the high school and what can be done in the short term. There'll be communications of their subcommittee of the task force and also the RASNC, which I'm going to forget what all those letters mean, but it's a local organization that is looking at adolescent sleep as well in school start times. Mr. Stango and I had the opportunity to attend the first meeting and just hear what's going on in other districts surrounding the Delaware County. And our timeline, as you can see, is to present our action plan. The September, where it says recruitment of participants and hold first meeting, what we're actually doing on that September 26th is reconvening the committee that's been in limbo for the year and a half now, and look to begin recruiting other members. One of the things we want to make sure that we have on this committee, on this task force, is a well-versed group that's going to be for it, against it, or have just a neutral stance, so we understand from all sides of what this would look like for us. Then we're going to be, over the course of the fall and early winter, collecting literature from information from other districts. And December and January begin our surveys of parents and students. February and March looking at our focus groups. And May and June holding forums to share out these findings of what we've encountered. And then looking for the summer of 2018 to determine that course of action and what's recommended to our superintendent and the rest of the administration.
All right.
So, I think one thing that would be useful as we go through this process, how are we going to weigh different factors that are going to be for or against changing the start time? So, how are we going to look at what students might lose out on? So they'll gain sleep. If they start an hour later, they're going to get up an hour later. But what are they going to lose? So they're going to lose an hour of daylight. So what's going to come out of that? And how are we going to assess, how do we have a paradigm for weighing those types of intangibles?
So there are different sets of tools out there to weigh and to look at what do you want your outcome to be and what are the products of those outcomes. So we have to, I think, first kind of look at our community and understand the model that we currently have to understand the direction we want to go, and then put that question to the test. What do we want to, what are we going to lose out on? What are we going to gain? And what are the impacts going to be? So I would say that this study is going to answer those questions.
So you think in the literature we'll come up with a way to weigh sort of factors like that, like how to look at what you're going to gain versus what you're going to lose and how to assess it? You think
Absolutely.
that there'll be
I think
tools to do that?
Based on the literature, as well as the information we collect in the focus groups and surveys, I think that's going to give us a clear indication of the direction we want to go.
Okay. And then obviously it has implications for across the board employment, because teachers are going to be asked to do really different, potentially different times. So if you're a high school coach and a teacher, you're going to be shuffled around in terms of what time of the day you're available to do different things. So I presume you'll have that as
Absolutely.
part of this.
Yes.
One of the things I like about what Dr. Robarczyk is doing and Mr. Stango together is that, as I understand and I've heard, is what you're trying to do is look at the issue of sleep first and foremost. So it's not just about school start time. There's a focus on sleep, and that's what we've heard from so many of our parents as well. This issue and the importance of sleep. So they're beginning with that topic, looking at sleep, the importance. What are there things that, regardless of a schedule change, what are the things that we can do to both educate our community, and what are some of the changes? We've had parents within our community who have listed some suggestions that maybe we could do maybe rather easily, possibly. So the committee is going to first and foremost look at that. He's also going about, one of the things I like is they're forming a new committee. Ideally, everybody who's unbiased will be on the committee. We realize we have a group of parents in the community that are, very much in favor. One of the, of making changes, and one of the things I found with this issue nationally is there really is no group that's the anti-sleep group. That doesn't really exist. What exists, though, is Ms. Solomon, exactly what you brought up, is the obstacles of making changes, and how do districts weigh those obstacles, and how does each district, because they're going to be different for every district, weigh those obstacles. And I think that is what's going to be the focus of the second semester, the second part of this committee this year, will be that focus to look at, looking at school start times, what are those? Because the literature, it is compelling. I've seen Dr. Owen speak. I'm very comfortable disagreeing with a lot of people on a lot of issues. I find it hard to disagree with a Harvard professor with all, the literature is very compelling. At the same time, the unique circumstances to Radnor have to be weighed with that literature and the obstacles, and that's something that the committee will look to do, at the second phase this year as part of that work, and to weigh exactly those things you're discussing, and what does that mean for Radnor kids, and being in a district that just made a 25-minute, I think it's 25-minute ultimately. The district I left just did that. We're going to want to look there, see what they're finding out about making a 25-minute change, and how has that been impacted, good and bad, and understand that. And there'll be other districts around the country that we can look at as well. So I'm excited about the way they're going about this, to try to also bring in some other members of the community to be part of a new committee to look at this, to develop recommendations, and then to move on. No decision has been made yet on what we're doing, but then once a recommendation is made, we either move forward with it or we don't as a district, and that's okay too. And then we move on.
I just want to have you answer this or keep this in mind as you go through this. I thought that one of the advantages of having high school students come home first before elementary school students is that I thought some of them were the ones that then met the younger siblings at the bus until maybe a parent got home. And that may not be true, or that may not be relevant. Maybe there's other arrangements made. But that's something that I'm pondering when we do this, because I always thought that was one of the big advantages of having the older children come home first, was that you've got the older student opening the house, and then the younger ones come home and they meet them at the bus, feed them snack, whatever. And that may not be true, but so I just want to know if that is or isn't an issue as you go forward.
There's actually a lot of literature just about that topic in itself, and it's both ways. Because some of the literature says that, yes, this is what's expected. And it's interesting how, I've been doing a lot of reading on this, but how it is in different parts of the country, where that's a factor, yes, and other parts it is not. There was one article I read, it was like 83% of the high school students have an after-school activity. So they're still not coming home right after. So it's one way or the other. So you have to look at both sides of it for sure.
Okay.
Our student rep has a question.
Okay, go right ahead.
It's more of a comment.
More comment.
So being a student at the high school and more a student athlete, With the courses that I take and the rigor and the time that that I spend at school after hours with sports or in the library, I don't understand how pushing back the time would be a good idea in a polite way. I like the amount of work that high school students have in this district is manageable, but just barely. And if we're getting home later on top of sports, we're not going to be going to sleep at a normal time. And we're not going to be gaining any sleep. It'll probably still be the same because we'll be waking up later, but we'll be going to sleep much later. Like I already go to sleep at 12 every night because of the work I have. Imagine if it's going to be pushed back a couple more hours or 1 hour. I don't think that's manageable for any high school student.
So do I hear you saying that you think all we'll do if we shift the start time back is that we'll just push back sort of the same demanding routine on students? That's how you view it? Like you're saying it is because of the demands on you that, so you start a half hour late, but then it's just going to push everything back. You'll go to bed a half hour late, you'll get up a half hour later, but it won't really solve the sleep problem.
That's how I'm
That's how
seeing
you see it.
And that's what I've
thank you.
heard. My family friend in Atlanta, Georgia, their district did this a few years back, and I don't think they like how it's turned out with being a student athlete and all that.
Olivia, thank you very much for your willingness to speak up. We're not going to solve this here. The main thing is to set up a process by which we will be looking at it. We have a lot of passion, certainly on the this is important, we need to do something side, as Mr. Batchelor represented. And then there may be a larger, somewhat less passionate group out there who think differently. I think the main thing is to make sure that as we do this, we are bringing in both sides, that we are fairly weighing things, that when we survey, this is one of these surveys where it ought not to just be a, click here, but it should be professionally managed and professionally tabulated so that we get fair results out of that. And that's one of the things that I feel very strongly about when we're at significant decision points, and it's not just kind of a testing the wind. This is one where we want to be fair. So I think the emphasis needs to be on fairly hearing people who share Olivia's perspective, fairly hearing people who share our public commenter, Dina Honesty's perspective, and then making a decision that makes the most sense for Radnor. Anything, we didn't hear from you, Julia. Do you have anything to say?
Just one question. So I'm looking at summer of 2018. You will be determining a course of action based on task force findings. Is it possible, just possible, that fall we would see a change in start time? If you felt that was a good
I don't think I can give you an answer to that right now, especially not knowing which direction we would be going. Talking to a couple of individuals at Unionville and what they had to go through, 2 months is really tight to pull that all together, for sure.
Okay.
I can tell you most places that have made a change, their one regret they had was making it too fast and not giving like a year for the public to be prepared. So if we ever would make a change, I would say we would have to give ourselves a lot of time. Olivia, I really thank you for your comment and speaking up, and please feel free to speak up at these meetings. That's why you're here. One of the things that will be also a product of these discussions, and that's why that first half is really focused on sleep, and I think everybody's on board with that. It's also looking at our kids' schedules. Olivia's sharing her schedule and what she's doing, and maybe one of the pieces we need to talk about is what is that time that it's too late for our kids to be at, what activities have our kids at school that are sanctioned activities and it's beyond 9 o'clock and they're still involved in something. I think we need to have some discussions and really look very closely at some of those pieces as well that's contributing to this. So there could be other pieces that I think will be good discussions that will come out of this.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I agree with that because I'm just stressed to hear your a junior, that she has to stay up till midnight to get her work done. I mean, I, on a regular basis, don't want to stay up doing my work at midnight. So, yeah, maybe we really, might morph into a broader conversation.
Yeah,
'Cause
well,
that-
okay.
It sounds
Let's
not good.
thank you very much, everyone, for your contributions, and we look forward with close interest in what will be happening here. Okay, item number 4, District Goal 3, the technology. Here's another one, the technology integration study.
So I wanted to just give you a quick update because we will be coming forward with some recommendations this winter as we start to wrap up the technology integration study. I gave you a copy here of the website. We do have a website up on the district's web portal. The link is up there at the top, and we do post updates every time we have another activity, another meeting, as we move through the various steps of the process, and we also post some of our related documents as well. So you can even just search technology integration study, and you can take a look at all that. This is just a snapshot, so I won't show you the whole thing. This is our kind of wrap-up timeline that we shared with the committee. Actually met last week on September 14th. I guess that was earlier this week? Last week. We met, and the focus of that meeting was the teacher voice. We looked at results of the teacher surveys. We also had 2 teachers from the high school who did a very comprehensive presentation for us, hearkening back to, for those of you who were here in 2011, when the presentation was given, and the result of the presentation in 2011 was that we purchased the one-to-one iPads for the high school. So they actually spent some time this summer going through that presentation and asking the question, how many of these things that we said we were going to do have we actually accomplished in the last 6 years? So they went through some various pieces of that and shared that with the committee. The next meeting, which will be in October, we're going to be focusing on the parent voice and the student voice. We had over 1,000 students participate in the student survey. Questions right from, would you rather have an iPad or a laptop or some other device, bring your own, those types of things. So we have a lot of information to look at from our students. We have our student focus group coming up shortly, so we'll have both of those pieces of information available. And then right now we have our parent survey open. It's about 12 questions. And again, we're getting down into the nitty-gritty. You know, if we were in a position where we would be asking parents to participate in some of the costs related to acquiring one-to-one devices, would parents be willing to contribute to that, and at what rate? 25%, 50%, 75%, those kinds of things. So those 2 pieces will be our focus in October. And then when we get together in November, we're going to start to pull things together, gather some of those lingering questions from our committee members. What is it that you still need to know before you'd be prepared to come together with a recommendation? We'll be starting to look at various hardware pieces during that meeting and during the December meeting, and then we're going to be coming back to administration and again, Mr. Batchelor, sometime in January, so that we can move forward with recommendations for next year. These are some of the things that have gone on over the summer and earlier this fall. We did spend a lot of time on June 15th, the last in-service day. We had all of our teachers from K-12 over at the high school. Some of them heard from Google, some of them heard from Microsoft, some of them heard from Apple. They were also in focus groups around the ISTE standards, pro-technology versus con-technology, and they spent some time at the end of the day completing their teacher survey. We sent a group to the ISTE conference, which is a National Technology Education Conference, from June 25th to 28th. Several people followed a strand around one-to-one technology and the use of one-to-one devices in the school setting. As I mentioned, the parent survey is open. The student survey is completed. We have 2 more site visits left. We're going to be going to Downingtown this Friday, and we'll be breaking up our time on Friday. Part of the time we'll be looking at the STEM Academy, Downingtown STEM Academy, where obviously there's a lot of different types of technology used in all different areas. And then we're also going to be looking at Downingtown Middle School, where the students are actually given the option to choose what type of hardware. They have one-to-one, but the students choose whether they want an Apple laptop, a Windows laptop, or whether they would like to get an iPad. So we'll be able to see some classrooms where multiple types of devices are being used in the same classroom setting, and talk to some of those teachers. Our Springford visit was just changed to October 3rd. Good news, a little earlier than we thought it was going to be. Springford had a Bring Your Own Device initiative going on. on, and so they didn't have a lot of devices in place. So we'll have an opportunity to look at a setting that experimented with some of the BYOD, what types of things they're doing with limited technology, and now they're moving into more of a one-to-one setting now. And as I mentioned before, we have our parent focus groups coming up both in the morning and in the evening. So we'll have an opportunity to follow up with our parents on some of those things they mentioned on the survey that we'd like to talk more about, and anything that they might be passionate about. So we encourage parents to participate in those focus group meetings. Any questions about technology study? No? Coming soon. All right, let's go right on
I'm
to
good. Keep moving.
comprehensive plan. So as you know, we've talked a lot about ESSA being reauthorized, and what happened is, even though we submitted our comprehensive plan last year, the comprehensive plan was sent back to us instead of being approved, not because there's anything wrong with it, but because with the reauthorization of ESSA, we actually are going to get another year on our comprehensive plan. So we need to go into our plan and we need to change the dates to make each of our goals 1 year longer. And we also have been asked to make some changes with the professional development section, but our plan already meets the guidelines, the updated guidelines on professional development, so we actually don't have to make any changes there. We should be fine. So what we'll be doing next month is I'll review those changes with you, very simple, but it will be coming to the board business meeting again to be approved, and it will have to be submitted again to PDE with a sign-off from the president of the board and superintendent and whatnot. So you'll see that come through mostly as a logistical process. All right?
Thank you.
And then one of the things we're going to try to do this year is get information to you at least a week prior so that you're able to see some of the things that are going to pop up on the board business meeting agenda. So for this month at the board curriculum committee meeting, you'll see that you do have a list of continuing clubs, and I know a question was asked about sponsors. Not all the clubs start at the beginning of the year. Some clubs, you know, if you're in the flower planting club or whatever it is, they start in the spring. Some of the things are seasonal, but we will have a more complete list of sponsors for the full board business meeting. We're also going to be pulling forward 2 new clubs that have been requested for the middle school. One will be Ultimate Frisbee, and the other one will be a day tripping ski club for the students at the middle school. And then you have a list of overnight trips that are proposed from the high school. Some of them are potential trips, you know, if we go to playoffs and things like that, we'll have those things approved in advance. So you have a list of those for your review. So you'll see those again when the board business meeting agenda comes out, but this is an opportunity to have an additional week. If you have any questions about any of those things, you want to ask today at our meeting, or you want to follow up with me sometime between now and the board business meeting, I'd be happy to answer those questions for you.
And just to be clear, too, on the agenda next week, there will be a vote, which is just a traditional vote on just approval of the clubs and activities. That's the only piece dealing with curriculum. Under personnel is a separate vote for those people who hold a supplemental contract and where we are with that up to date. So that will be separate, listed by person. So for this, it's just the approval of the club and activity. Approving the actual sponsor is something that's separate that happens under personnel.
Thank you.
So I have a question. I see principals are all still here. How difficult is it to find sponsors? Some of the clubs don't have sponsors yet. How difficult will it be to find someone to do that?
As I was saying, good evening.
Hi, Esther.
Hi, Esther. Good evening. We have to be determined on there. We were just tweaking, but we actually have all of our sponsors at the middle school. So even though those are listed, we had our last conversation. Some of it was a lag because I wasn't there. But as I was meeting today, we double checked, and we do have all of our individuals. And like what Dr. McQuiggan said, some of them do take place in the spring, but we do have all of our sponsors. So we'd rather have it verified. And so we'll see those staff members tomorrow. But we already know it's the same individuals that typically do it. So we lean towards to be determined versus putting their names down. And they may just say, I'm not going to do it this time. But we've already spoken with everyone. We do it in June, and then we do it again in the beginning of September. But we do have sponsors for everyone.
So the answer is it was pretty easy.
I would say pretty much, yes. It usually is. We usually go with, but I don't like to assume. So I like to get that final nod and then get it in writing. And we're trying to make sure that the documents that they're presenting are updated and everything is
appropriate language and good descriptors.
And and this is not specific to the middle school, but one of the things to keep in mind about this, because this question comes up pretty regularly, and that is, how is it that we figure out who's getting what from the district in terms of underwriting of these trips? And what's the difference between golf getting $1,000 and high school basketball getting $0? How are we making those decisions? And is it history or is there a process? I mean, I know we budget, but in terms of, it's just stark when you look at it, and the question will get asked, I'm sure.
Yeah. Go ahead, Dan, you want to? I like how you bail me out now.
Sorry.
So, to answer your question, when you see $0 per student and $1,000 for the total district for golf at the top, that's because that is anticipating our students making the state playoffs. So, a lot of times when you see the zeros, that is the district paying for a student making PIAA or something like that. The other things where there is student costs are elective trips during the course of the season.
Okay. Okay, so it's a difference between elective and kind of programmatic or somewhat programmatic or partially programmatic?
Yeah, so as a former high school coach, my previous district, it's very common for districts to pay for any type of playoffs that a particular sports team will go on. So if you go to districts and you win districts and you go to states and it's an overnight state trip, then the district pays for that. Correct.
Okay, got it.
But if the team elects to go to Hawaii for a preseason tournament, the district's not on the hook for that because that's something that the parents and the students agree to.
Oh, all right. Well, that's actually helpful to know. Okay, thank you for that. I appreciate that.
Wait, don't go anywhere. I have a question I thought we had a high school best buddies. I see we have it at the middle school. Do we not have a high school best buddies anymore?
We do have high school best
Am I
buddies.
missing it? Is it called best buddies? It's not under B. And then I looked under Radnor. Is it Radnor best buddies?
If that is an omission, it will be in there. Actually, it is not in there because I think that we pulled the ones that were supplementals. These are only unpaid, correct?
Correct.
So that is a paid club, and so that is not on this list.
Okay,
So
that's
these are all
huge
volunteer clubs.
Piece of information.
So if you see like FBLA and different types of things that are posted and have their set supplementals, they will be coming from the HR office.
Okay, thank you.
Olivia, did you have a question? That's a supplemental.
Yes, Model Congress, Model UN. Those are paid supplementals.
Okay. And so wait, when are we going to see that list? Different time?
It will be on the board agenda, but that will be coming from the HR office.
Right, so it'll be a supplemental.
But you know what I'll do, going forward, when we do the clubs, I will attach the posting that goes up, because the posting has a list of all the supplementals on one piece of paper, and it's really easy to reference.
Let me just say, with regard to that, thank you to those teachers who step up and do this on a volunteer basis. That is a big deal, and it is an important thing, and I want every teacher who is doing that to know what appreciation we have for your willingness to volunteer at that level. That is a big deal, and thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Dan.
All right.
Nice.
Anything else? Is that it, Maureen?
That's it.
All right, good. Well, let's do second public comment, please. Hi, Roberta.
I would like to reinforce, Ms. Michelson, that the school board might wish to write a thank you note to those teachers. They probably aren't watching the TV show. And I'd like to take my time tonight to speak specifically about the sleep study. First, I recall the Radnor Board of Health also addressed the need for adolescents to start school after 8:30. This is not a matter of individual preference, but a well-researched and documented health issue. As board members and parents, we don't second-guess recommendations of the American Medical Association, the Centers for Disease Control, and the American Pediatrics Association when it comes to vaccinating our students. Sleep needs of students should not be ignored because we will all pay the consequences. Secondly, I would caution about surveying before educating. The challenges of any kind of change, such as those mentioned by Ms. Solomon and Olivia, are pretty well documented, and those obstacles should not be used as a reason not to move forward, but rather as a source of problem solving rather than promoting a status quo. Third, in looking at the comprehensive plan that Maureen mentioned, if you consider the mission in terms of our students and what they need and what our goals are for them, that mission can really only be enhanced by addressing their health and wellness as promoted by sleep hygiene. And finally, my heart goes out to Olivia. Based on what I've experienced as a teacher and as a parent, and the students that I've read about, tired students are basically not the kind you want to live with. And they are also...
Don't take that personally.
Don't take it personally. Ask your mom. I think she'd concur. And I believe also because students at the high school level who are getting probably 7 hours of sleep or less like you are less efficient in using their time to complete tasks. And in terms of this, I would also like to hope that the guidelines regarding the homework policy are being followed by those who teach at the high school, because that too could make a difference. Thank you.
Thanks, Roberta. Hello.
Hello. Hi, I'm Michelle Leonard. Thanks for giving us a minute to speak. And first, I just wanted to start off by thanking Ken for making the sleep a priority project for this year, and for Tony and Dave for taking it on. And I just wanted to say, yes, same thing. I was going to comment on what you said because I have a high schooler too. And I wanted to say that, just so you know, most of the studies show in schools that have flipped, kids end up going to bed at the same time. Even if they're going to school later, they somehow work quicker or more diligent. I'm not sure of the reasoning, but the studies show they end up going to bed at the same time, but because they're going to school later, they get an hour extra sleep basically in the morning. So I wanted to point that out. And Judith Owens quotes in a lot of her talks that a tired student that takes 5 hours to get homework done, a child that's getting 8 to 10 hours of sleep, it takes them, I can't remember if she said 2 hours or 3 hours, but it's significantly less time to complete their chores if they are getting an adequate night's sleep. And to your comment, Lydia, about shouldn't lose anything, I totally agree. I don't think we should do this or our kids are missing out on sports, Model UN, babysitting, etc. But the studies seem to show that the benefits so far outweigh the obstacles that the challenge is figuring out how to do it, not if we should do it. 2 more quick things. One, I totally agree with Ken. I think we need to look at all the pieces contributing to this: screen time, homework policy, educating parents so they know their kids should be in bed at a certain time, all of that. And lastly, Susan, thank you for your comment on surveys. I strongly feel that way too. I worry about sending out a survey that might be asking students, including my own, who tells me he doesn't want to go to school later because he's going to, et cetera, et cetera. Well, that's like asking him if he wants to eat steak for dinner every night or quinoa. He's going to pick steak, but I don't let him do that every night. Right. So some things are out of our parental control, and it's hard if you're trying to do everything, but your child still has to get up at 6:15 to get to school on time. So again, thank you all. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Michelle. Hello and welcome.
Everyone. Thank you. My name is Sarah Fox. I have 2 middle schoolers, one who will be a high schooler next year. I'm also here in favor of sleep, and I've spoken before. It will be a tough road, but one that's well worth traveled, I think. I think one of the most important things in this is education. I think a lot of parents don't know about this research, and the automatic answer a lot of times is to not go for the change because change is hard. But as Mr. Batchelor mentioned, the research is uncomparable. I mean, you could spend days looking for research that goes the other way and says they don't need this sleep, and it's not there. Our children are sleep deprived, and it's affecting every aspect of their life, their physical health, their mental health. It's going to be hard. There's obstacles. I think we have to listen to the community, but I think we have to educate them first. And I think our job is to do the most good for the most number of students. And I think the way we do that is by delaying start time and helping them get the sleep they need. So I look forward to working on this project, and I hope that we make some progress in helping our kids get more sleep. Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah. Hello again.
Hello, Judy Sherry. The funding for sports trips, is that a complete list or is that a partial list of this? I noticed, for instance, ice hockey isn't listed as a sport that gets funding.
Might be just the ones we know about, or the first few months. I wasn't
Right.
paying that close of
Hockey's a
attention.
club, too,
I mean,
right?
that could be.
Oh, no, it looks like it is. It's probably as much as we know right now, right?
Yeah, these are the trips that we know that are coming for this school year.
Okay.
And I guess in looking at some of the requirements, the $1,200 for girls lacrosse to go on a trip per student, I'm wondering if that team has in place some ideas for fundraising and defraying some of the costs, because that's an expensive trip. So that's my
Santa
question.
Barbara.
Yeah. Sounds like
I'm sure there are other choices.
It sounds like a lot of fun, and that's all great. I just think that for some families, it might be problematic in terms of having that kind of extra cash around. And just while I'm on that topic, something for future consideration, and I think this really shows how oftentimes committees overlap. But a board member brought up at a previous committee meeting about the fact that in some instances it appears that booster clubs require students that participate in a sport to write a check to the booster club to participate. And I would like to hear that fleshed out a little bit in this committee in a future time, whether that is indeed a requirement and how much are we looking for students to pay to play. So I found that interesting. About the sleep task force, I guess my questions related to that are a little bit more specific, and that is I don't have an idea listening as to how large the committee is. Maybe you don't have an answer to that at this point, but I would be interested in understanding how the participants are going to be recruited so that the committee ends up being well-balanced, however that is. And also, just from past experience, surveys, and I think, Ms. Michelson, you mentioned that it should be a professionally handled survey. I'm hoping that the questions of the survey are able to be released and reviewed before the surveys go out, because having some firsthand experience with surveys can be
Biased in
yeah, they can be written so that you can get the response you want.
Yeah.
And it's really important here that we do have an objective survey. So just bring that to the group's attention. I think that about does it. So thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Oh, just one other quick question. How do clubs become paid supplementals? Because that was just brought up too. I'd like to know the difference between regular clubs and ones that get district funding.
Hi again,
Hi.
Dina. Welcome.
So one of the objections that we heard here was that delaying school start times, or we didn't hear that here, but has been raised in the past, is that delaying school start times is a way of coddling our kids or not preparing them for the adult world when they might have to get up earlier. But I do want to point out that using that as a reason not to delay school start times, which is based on a biological shift that's unique to circadian rhythms in the adolescent period, using that excuse as a reason to not delay the times is like saying we shouldn't let our toddlers take naps because they're going to go to kindergarten and it's full day and they won't be able to take a nap. We have to really consider the science behind the sleep aspect. I don't even know if calling it delaying school start time is the big issue here. It's really how do we allow our kids to get the amount of sleep they need to be successful. And delaying school start times is a possible solution. So I think it's just important to focus on those things. I also think that it might be pretty great for the task force for school start times and sleep studies would work with the technology group, because there are some related issues there.
Absolutely.
So I think it's, something that definitely should be considered, at least that they share information.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate your comments, and we'll get there. Hi, Sarah. Welcome.
Hi, thanks, Susan. My name is Sarah Dunn, Blackfriar Road. I just wanted to say I'm really happy that the sleep study task force is back on track. I thought that this was started like a year or two ago, so I'm glad to know it's really getting active again. I would hope that as part of its progress throughout the year, they're reporting back to the curriculum committee so that the public can kind of hear what the progress is, even if you want to just cut public comment, because I know it's going to take over the meetings. I wanted to echo the concerns about the timing of the survey, that the public needs to be educated and get together and talk about things like that, because I think everybody comes at it with their own perspective. I, as a working parent, would have loved elementary school to start earlier so I didn't have to manage before and after school care. But also, I think December and January is a really tough time to get survey responses in, so I worry about whether you're going to get the answers. And then, as someone who went to high school at a private school, I will tell you, starting later is awesome, and I still went to bed at 11 or 12. So I will just say that I think that there are high school students in your area starting later who aren't necessarily staying up any later than you are. And I do think that the ability to get a proper amount of sleep makes you much more effective in getting your work done. So I would just say thank you so much for getting back on track with all this. Thanks.
Thank you, Sarah.
We have one additional online, Kathy Breakiron. I'm sorry I cannot attend the meeting this evening, but I wanted to express my endorsement of the Student Sleep Task Force efforts this year. I look to a worthy endeavor and hope that they find a solution that will benefit our student community. As the chairperson of the RHS Ask Committee, Alliance for Safe Kids, I work to help parents deal with various issues that impact our high school students. We have focused on topics such as teen mental health and suicide, drug and alcohol use, athletic participation, and college transition. Student health and wellness directly impacts all these topics in one way or another. Studies have shown that students tend to be healthier and make better choices when they are well rested. I would like to thank the board and superintendent for addressing this issue in a serious way.
Thank you. All right. Meeting adjourned, and thank you very much for sticking to an aggressive schedule and